Okay, so today I want to talk about white Kyurem and black Kyurem. And these are two figures that I didn't actually use personally and didn't see too much of playing on ladder. But I think they're both really interesting figures. They're both very similar. Minor differences. But I think that they have a lot of really interesting things about them. And hopefully I can cover all of that and do it justice. I don't think that white Kyurem or black Kyurem were necessarily overlooked. Maybe they were, actually, but I can't say for sure because, like I said, I didn't play them personally, so I don't have too much experience and didn't test out a lot of what I might come up with in this video. But let's go ahead and get started and see what we're working with here. So black Kyurem and white Kyurem, as you know, are forms from the base Kyurem and require you to use DNA splicers to change into them. I'll talk a bit about DNA splicers after I explain the figure a little bit more. So let's start with the ability once again. So only set as a form in a deck. The effects of abilities of the battle opponent that increase or decrease attack damage are nullified. This Pokemon can MP move over other Pokemon. When this Pokemon is knocked out in battle, it can change form to Kyurem without moving to the PC. And if it does, if there are any Reshiram that have been excluded, move one Reshiram to the bench. And as I'm sure you know, that last part means that when you DNA Splicer, you banish Reshiram or Zekrom to change forms, and you get them back whenever Kyurem changes back to its base form. So let's start with this first part. Preventing abilities that increase or decrease damage it's okay. Probably the least important part of its ability, in my opinion. This is on a few things, and it's never incredibly significant. It can be, but I think situations where it is very important doesn't come up too often. And that's because both of the Kyurem forms do 140, 150 if you're a chain 10, and that's good against some things. It matches Mega Lucario's damage because, actually let me double check, but I believe Mega Lucario does 140. Just want to make sure. Yeah, it does 140 at base, 150 at chain 10, so you at least match Mega Lucario's damage. But you actually beat it with your ability, so that's kind of nice. That's something, like I said, I don't think that comes up too often. But better to have it than not, I suppose. However, the second part is much more interesting. And you may not realize why at first. This Pokemon can MP move over other Pokemon. And that sounds fairly standard, right? You know, like Marshadow does that, Celebi does that, but they don't do it exactly the same way the Kyurem forms do it. And the reason is that if I show you an example like Mega Rayquaza, it says this Pokemon can MP move over other Pokemon on the field. And this is an important distinction. Because white Kyurem doesn't specify on the field, this is a figure that doesn't need invisibility cape to move through a blocked entry point, whether it's your figure or your opponent's figure. White Kyurem and black Kyurem can move from the bench through these figures. And this is really nice. It means that if this figure's on the bench and you have to come towards your goal, you don't have to spend a long throw. You don't use invisibility cape. Not that you would. That's no one used Invisibility Cape, but this gives you the option to do that. Now, how often the Kyurem forms are on the bench? They're probably not on the bench that often, but just like with the first part of this ability, it's better to have this than not, because I don't think any other figure has this innately. Ghost types can do this if there's a ghost on your entry and you have Phantom Sphere or Phantom Energy. You can move through. Actually, I don't remember if Phantom Energy lets you do that without status. I think it can. But you just have this straight away. And that's really nice. So maybe even if Kyurem doesn't end up on your bench that often, you still have maybe a scoop up play, anything like that. And its last part of its ability is what makes it very strong. Very, 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 very strong. So this and Keldeo and Zygarde that I mentioned in the first video is a 3 MP figure that has 2 lives. And this is actually a better 3 MP just in terms of movement than both Keldeo and Zygarde, because like I said, you move through figures with Kyurem. And this is incredible. So before I go any further, I suppose I will show DNA splicers just to get it out of the way once I find it. It's not too far down. Thought it wasn't. I'm sure I've passed it already. Well, technical difficulties here. Sorry about this. There you are. I'm apparently blind. So let's read this just so that we know for sure what it's doing. Choose one of your Kyurem on the field, plus one of your Zekrom or Reshiram on the field, bench, or in the PC. Exclude that Zekrom or Reshiram from the duel, and change the form of Kyurem to black or white. And that's specific to which one you banish. Obviously, if you banish Zekrom, you get black Kyurem. And you can only have one form set on Kyurem at a time. So one Kyurem can't change to either or, it's only set to one specifically. And the Kyurem has to be on the field when you do this. And if any of your Kyurem is knocked out, this plate returns to its unused state. So it's kind of like Meteoric Teachings. It does not refresh if white or black Kyurem are KO'd. It's only if the base form Kyurem. That's just like Meteoric Teachings. So, what are the strengths of this figure? Or even its weaknesses? Maybe I'll start with its weaknesses first, or at least some of them. So, I think part of the reason you probably didn't see too many Kyurem decks, the first part really is that you have to play Reshiram or Zekrom, and these figures aren't terrible, but they're not great either. So some people would run both Reshiram and Zekrom. That was definitely possible. I'm not a deck building expert, and like I said, I didn't run these, so I can't say for sure. But by having Reshiram and Zekrom, you know, you obviously miss out on some stuff because you also have to have at least one Kyurem for each. I'll talk about maybe using this in decks a little bit later. But regardless, so you have to use Reshiram or Zekrom, and that's kind of a liability. There are good things about it. I wish I had structured this better. I always say this, but I'm going to be kind of jumping around a lot because I don't have sort of a good structure for the way I'm going through this. But let's go back to Kyurem for now then. So you have to put base form Kyurem out on the field and then use DNA splicers. And what I was going to say earlier is the reason I think it was pretty difficult to use this on the ladder. The main issue is Aegislash. Aegislash laughs at Kyurem and both of these Kyurem forms. Not entirely. Obviously, Iceburn and Freeze Shock can outdamage Blade form. So you do have one wheel piece to survive. And I think I would probably, personally, I would probably max out the Iceburn or Freeze Shock and then give it minimum at least one chain level, just because that lets you survive Aegislash. So, like I said, this is pretty susceptible, and there's not really much you can do about base form Kyurem to protect it from Aegislash. Unless maybe like you land Outrage, that's the only way you survive, or if they land King Shield. So if your opponent doesn't have Aegislash, then you know it's fairly easy to bring Kyurem here and you're immediately threatening the entry point. If your opponent does have Aegislash, it's probably hard to use Kyurem early game, unless your opponent blocks something else with Aegislash. Like sometimes, if this is Dawn Wings, a very common play is to bring out Aegislash and get rid of its ability straight away. I did this a lot. A lot of other people did this. So it just depends on if your opponent decides to do this or not. If they don't, then maybe let Kyurem hang back a little bit. Who knows? So you're really afraid of Aegislash and a lot of other things as well. Let's see. I want to talk a bit about how to use this, or at least what are the possibilities when using this. So the same thing applies to this as to any figure that can stay on the field when it's KO'd, like Dawn Wings, Zygarde, Primal Kyogre. And that's that you like those figures, you have the play where Z-moving or just attacking the goalie, you get rid of this and then your opponent has to move this. They can't KO it, they have to move it. Which I also forgot to mention, so there's Twinkle Tackle, Moongeist Beam, Menacing Moonrays Maelstrom. There's also Judgment and 4D Drive. So those four things, maybe like Take Away. There's other stuff as well. You can Corkscrew Crash. But regardless, this is a tough situation, and that only only 2 life figures can sort of put your opponent in check like this. So it has that, but also now Dawn Wings can banish a Necrozma to change back to its form if you're running a deck like that. That was very rare, very rare. But Kyurem, on the other hand, you can recycle. So anywhere on the board, when the Kyurem form, the form change, is KO'd, you get the Reshiram or Zekrom back on your bench, and if you have another DNA Splicers ready, you can use it immediately and go back to being the form. And this, I think, adds a lot of versatility. The first thing that came to mind just now, like I said, I'm just kind of I'm going through this on a whim, just whatever comes to mind. Where should I put Kyurem? So let's say you have a figure here, or I always try to. I like to find more practical examples, but I mean, lots of things would happen during a game, so I suppose anything is possible. So this is all hypothetical anyway, but if Kyurem is on the field, let's just say it's here, it doesn't matter. If this is white Kyurem or black Kyurem, and it gets KO'd by something, let's see, that's... Man, my examples are terrible. Whatever, we'll just leave it there, fine. Or actually, I'll put it somewhere else. Maybe it's here. And your opponent KOs it with something. No, that's also a bad example. I'm so sorry. Here, we'll put it here. We'll put it here, and it's KO'd. You get the Reshiram or Zekrom back, and you can use them immediately, which means that your opponent may not realize that by KOing the Kyurem here, one sec, the music, it always does this. By KOing Kyurem here, you actually get a surround when you get the Reshiram or Zekrom back here. And that's really nice. And the other nice thing about DNA splicers specifically is that you can change into Kyurem no matter where, or change the form no matter where the Reshiram is. I'm just going to say Reshiram. I don't need to keep saying both of them. So you can actually use Reshiram offensively, like use it for position and stuff, because like I mentioned, or at least I was going to mention at the beginning, when using these Kyurem forms, you have to put yourself at a figure disadvantage to gain this. And whether or not this figure is worth it, I think really depends on, excuse me, on how your deck is structured and how you're planning on using it. So even if Reshiram is in the PC, like I said, you can still change forms, which means you have access. You can still play with 6 figures and go down to 5 just whenever you need it. Now, one thing, this is what I saw most people doing with this deck. In order to negate the figure disadvantage, you have to have a figure that can bring back a banished figure. And probably the most reliable thing is if you're using white Kyurem, Ho-Oh can bring back the Reshiram, even though it's excluded. Just whenever Ho-Oh is KO'd, you get it back. The other option is Altaria. So if Mega Altaria is KO'd, all of your banished figures come back, so that means you can also get Zekrom back. But Ho-Oh was the thing I saw most commonly. And maybe I'll start talking about this now. It was also partially ran with Victini. Because, well, one, Victini also benefits from Ho-Oh, but Victini is probably the runner you would use in a Kyurem deck, if you're even using a runner, that is, just because it has the fusion attacks. So in my opinion, it seems really difficult to play both Zekrom and Reshiram, at least in the meta that the end of the game was in, because you're putting yourself down one figure, either or, and then you're also using whichever one is left, Reshiram or Zekrom, and it's sort of a kind of a mediocre figure, to be honest. I like them, but they were hard to use at the end of the game. But Victini was a very good figure. One, it's 3 MP, 2, Searing Shot is very big, so you get burns, and 3, it has a respin ability to allow it to get more KOs potentially. This isn't about Victini though, or the whole video isn't about Victini, but I figured I should bring it up just because it has those fusion attacks. Now, I don't know if the fusion attack strategy is the best way to go for the Kyurem forms. I think it's a nice option, but I don't think you have to run Victini or the other Tau Dragon to make use of this figure. I guess Ice was fine because they're Ice Dragon. Yeah, I don't think the fusion attacks are very reliable on these figures. I think I would probably try using these figures in a different way. Make use of its second life, make use of its movement abilities, and really try to take advantage of the way you use the Zekrom or Reshiram. Like I showed with that surround option. Where should I go next? Let's see. Maybe I'll talk a bit about the wheels and the attacks specifically then. So Fusion Flare and Fusion Bolt, they are very good. Obviously any exclusion effect, if you can pull it off, is extremely good. Very powerful. Puts you at a permanent advantage unless they can get it back somehow. But like I said, I think just using one Victini is probably the way to go. I think just a pure, if you want to use a fusion deck, fusion attack deck, I think just a pure Victini deck is better. And that's why I said I think using the Kyurem form specifically for the fusion attacks is fine, but I don't know if that's necessarily the most appropriate way to use them. I I hope I don't come off as like elitist. Absolutely, run what you want, and this did work out a lot. Like I saw people running it, they did well. So I hope I don't come off as saying as it's bad. It's definitely good. But I like the other stuff Kyurem does a lot more. So let's keep going then. Let's talk about Iceburn. And the other one, Freeze Shock. Pretty much the same. The only difference is that Freeze Shock paralyzes and Iceburn burns. And if the battle opponent has weight, the battle opponent is knocked out instead of this Pokemon. Now, I'm not so sure on this. Obviously, it's not bad to have that, but I don't know how often you can pull off something like that, because I don't think a lot of what Kyurem's sort of partner figures, I don't think they give many things weight. But your opponent might give themselves weight. You know, maybe that can come up. But I don't think it's very important. Burning and paralyzing, fine. Like I was talking about, or I think I mentioned it yesterday, burn is better than paralyze. Maybe I mentioned that outside of one of the recordings, but burn, at least on its own, has always been better than paralysis, because you get minus 10 damage in addition to removing a wheel slice. So these are pretty decent attacks, and like I mentioned, 140 is okay, but I think that's actually really powerful for a runner. Celebi is obviously a much better. It's much better because you have Grass Knot, and I think that would always be better than like Freeze Shock or the other one, Iceburn. But it's still nice because this is a runner that does actually have high damage, so you can actually attack into stuff. Not as easily as Celebi, obviously, but it is fairly strong for a runner. Now, Draco Meteor, I mentioned this yesterday, and maybe I should explain it a bit more. So I said Devastating Drake was bad, but then pretty soon after I mentioned that Draco Meteor was good. And that's only because Devastating Drake is bad because you spend your Z move doing that. Draco Meteor, on the other hand, is a move that you can land on your opponent's turn without you spending anything. Like if White Kyurem is attacked and I'll land Draco Meteor, then I get to make something spin for free. You know, I don't really lose anything from that. And whereas Devastating Drake, I have to spend my turn using that Z move and going for it when I was most likely better off just using a different Z move or even just straight up attacking. But what you get out of Draco Meteor is also very good, because you can, like I said, you can sometimes get this for free. If you just land it on your opponent's turn, you get to pick a figure, make it spin, and sometimes you get a free KO anywhere on the board. And like I mentioned with Thousand Arrows, with Zygarde, and Origin Pulse with Kyogre, that's always strong. Being able to pick off anything, anywhere, is always strong, even if it's just a random chance. But it's not strong on Devastating Drake because you spend your Z move for that, whereas this is just a regular spin attack. So I wanted to maybe come up with a few plays that Kyurem does. This always goes poorly whenever I try to do this, though. But Kyurem has Sub-Zero Slammer, and this is a very good Z move. Very good white Z move, one of the best. It might be the best white Z move. Maybe like Searing Sunray Smash is better, or Ultra Necrozma's. Anyway, I'm not doing a this isn't supposed to be a Z move tier list. Sub-Zero Slammer is good. So it's pretty common for your opponent to have figures within 2 steps of you. Especially if you're on your opponent's side of the board, it's way more common. So let's see. Let's say your opponent is defending here, and there's something here. Then Z-moving the goalie, you can freeze this figure. And it can't do anything. Your opponent has to tag it. You know, obvious stuff with freeze. Now, what this also means is that if your opponent doesn't do something about a frozen figure, we'll put it somewhere else. Like maybe you freeze the figure back here, or even on your side of the board. If your opponent doesn't do something about it, now, even though your wheel may not be spectacular against things in general, now your wheel is perfectly serviceable. And really good, actually, because this figure is frozen, so you don't have any losing rolls. You can still land this, which is a little sad. But now, when you freeze something with White Kyurem, now you can get a free Draco Meteor, or a free KO. So the fact that this figure can freeze makes it much easier for you to attack with, even with other stuff, because your opponent's wheel is locked and they essentially just spin a miss. You're guaranteed not to lose and essentially guaranteed to win. That's different. You're guaranteed not to lose. You're not guaranteed to win because you can still miss or land dodge or whatever. But that's very strong, and you're running this from Kyurem. And I think I was trying to come up with decks earlier, and I couldn't necessarily find something that I was entirely happy with. But I think running at least 2 Kyurem, probably both with the same form, because like I said, I probably wouldn't run Reshiram and Zekrom. I don't want to tell people how to build decks, because that's not what this is about, but I think I would run, come on music, sorry. I would run 2 Kyurem, maybe even 3, but probably not 3, because you lose so hard to Aegis Slash. 2 Kyurem, and they both have White Kyurem. I know I've mostly been talking about White Kyurem. I'll talk about Black Kyurem some as well. But if I have both of these Kyurem on the board, now either one of these can suddenly become a 3 MP figure. And this is actually really scary when you combine this with the Ho-Oh. Because then that means you can get 2 White Kyurem with only 1 Reshiram, and it can be kind of a surprise as well for your opponent. And I just thought of this. This is a little bit ridiculous. Hold on, I need to double check. Draco Meteor. Yeah. This might be a little bit ridiculous. Well, I'll talk about the ridiculous thing second. But what I want to say is that if you're running 2 Kyurem and only 1 Reshiram and you have Ho-Oh, this means that you can get a surprise play off of your opponent. And I guess it's not that much of a surprise, because if they see you're running Ho-Oh, they know that you can do this. And that's where Draco Meteor comes in. I'll talk about that in a second. Let's say I have white Kyurem here and I have regular Kyurem here, and my Reshiram is gone. So if Ho-Oh is KO'd on my opponent's turn, either maybe I get Rainbow Wing and surround Ho-Oh and something else, hopefully, or even just itself, who knows. Having Ho-Oh get taken out on my opponent's turn means I get Reshiram back, and if I have a second DNA Splicer, or even if one of my Kyurems was KO'd, like if I only have 1 DNA Splicer, I can get it back if this Kyurem is KO'd at any point. But regardless, if I have DNA Splicer available, I can now banish that Reshiram again and immediately take this entry point in kind of a surprise play. Because Ho-Oh got KO'd on my opponent's turn, and now this Kyurem suddenly became 3 MP with 2 lives. I have to keep mentioning that. This is a 3 MP that moves through stuff that has 2 lives. And has the Ice Z move. And has decent damage. And if you're running Victini, can vanish. Whew, that's a lot of stuff. Not all of it is very reliable, like the Fusion Flare attack. But the other things are always good. And what I was going to mention is that can sometimes be a surprise. Let's say regular Kyurem is here. Well, it doesn't matter. I always show an example with the goal, just because this is sort of the most obvious thing I can show on map. But let's say white Kyurem is here, or anywhere. Maybe it's back here, and your opponent attacks it and you land Draco Meteor. Now, this is really interesting. Draco Meteor, you can use this on your own figure. Doing something like that is usually pretty stupid. However, in this situation, it can actually win you the game if the goal is open. Although, if that was true, your opponent wouldn't attack here, because then you would get Reshiram back. Like if this was KO'd, you get Resh back and then DNA Splicer. Regardless, maybe the better example is like a surround situation. Well, whatever. I'll just use this. Like I said, this is always hypothetical. My examples are always bad. This is a theme. Every time. But what I was going to say, and maybe you saw where I was going with this, you can actually Draco Meteor and hit your own Ho-Oh in order to get Reshiram back. And that's crazy. That's really ridiculous. But it's something only this figure can do. Well, yeah, I guess so. It's something only this figure can do. And that's a wild play, and I would have loved to have seen someone pull that off. Maybe I will, hopefully in the remake. I'll run a Kyurem deck and do something crazy like that. But like I was saying, it's hard to use Kyurem though, because you want Kyurem, you probably want to you have Reshiram, sometimes you also have Ho-Oh, probably have Ho-Oh. I would probably run Ho-Oh at least. You don't have to. But that's 4 figures that are weak to Aegislash. Ho-Oh has no winning rolls against Aegislash. Reshiram and the White Kyurem can survive if they land their high damage move. But it's just extremely weak to Aegislash. And that's a real bummer, but you know, Aegislash beats a lot of things, so what can you do? Let's see. Also, the reason running multiple Kyurem is important, or at least I would consider a good idea, is so that you can make use of regular Kyurem's ability. So White Kyurem can Ice Z move something in range of Kyurem, and I don't know what I was going to say, but so you can give yourself a play like that and lock and kind of help yourself in terms of figure advantage, because you're putting yourself behind banishing one figure. The fact that you can lock up an opponent's figure with your regular Kyurem, if either Kyurem itself or the White Kyurem gets an Ice Z move off, that's incredibly strong. And you know, part of the reason freeze decks are so good is because of that. Now, obviously, there are lots of figures that can change out of freeze. Aegislash itself can. I believe it can by activating its ability. Maybe not. I'm not sure about it, but Dawn Wings can if you have Ultra Burst. Any figure with a Mega can. But either way, that means your opponent has to do something about it. They have to switch, they have to scoop up, or they have to spend that plate, or they have to take out Kyurem itself. And that can actually set up a play for you as well. If you don't have DNA splicers left anymore, having an opponent's figure locked down with one of your Kyurems, like let's say maybe your other Kyurem is here, they're not allowed, like if their goal is open anyway, they're not allowed to KO this Kyurem now to free this figure. Let me actually put this other Kyurem. Well, yeah, let me move stuff around. I'll put it like this, just because the example I had earlier, this Kyurem could move over and block this. Well, yeah. So now, and in the other example, I didn't have to change it. Whatever. Sorry. Like I said, if they KO this figure, you get DNA splicers back and can take the gold now. So that means that your opponent they should be afraid to take on your Kyurems to free trapped figures like this. And I think having White Kyurem or Black Kyurem as a tech in a freeze deck might be pretty good. even if you don't feel like building a whole deck around the Kyurem forms, I think they can actually be a nice tech for freeze decks just for this one reason, and that's that they're now afraid, or there's sort of a punishment for taking out a Kyurem that has a figure locked down. Let's see. Maybe I should talk about Black Kyurem. I've kind of been ignoring it. Not ignoring it, but I think White Kyurem, there's more to say about White Kyurem because you can use Ho-Oh to bring back the Reshiram, and that's, like I said, that's a little more reliable than Mega Altaria. But Black Kyurem, I think I believe it was Full Melt, who was using Black Kyurem a decent amount as a rush figure, and the reason is because it has fly, 3 MP, move through stuff, and has fly. And that's pretty strong. So if your opponent misplays, so I brought this up, I don't remember which video it was, but I brought this up in one example I was saying. I think it was the first video when I was talking about stack attack plays. When you bring out a figure that threatens the entry point, you should usually go on the opposite side, because if you come on the same side, there's a small chance for most runners that they attack and win a roll here, and then it's GG. But because Black Kyurem has fly, that becomes an even greater liability for the opponent to do this. Like I said, this is not something people would normally do though, and it's not a good idea. It's never a good idea to do this. Unless this is like Vibrava, then it's fine. Vibrava or Thunderous Therian form. Those are the only figures that can move here safely. But yeah, this is a figure that has 3 MP and fly. So this is essentially your opponent has to treat it. If you have Kyurem on the board, they have to treat it as a 5 to 6 MP figure. And how does that work? So you have 3 MP, let's say it's on this entry point, or even hell, all the way back here. And your opponent has a figure here. You can move 1, 2, 3, fly this figure 4, 5, 6. You can move 6 spaces off of this. If you're on the entry point, you actually win here. Well, not win, but you can get to this point from the bench. That's crazy. I actually mentioned that when I was talking about Garchomp with Double Flight, which is much harder. Black Kyurem can get to this point much easier than Garchomp can even. So your opponent has to be very aware. If you're running Black Kyurem, they have to always be aware of you going for a fly play. But obviously it also has all the same stuff I mentioned about White Kyurem. You know, you got the Ice Z move, you have 2 lives, and that's why landing here is good as well. So if something happens to where you somehow get Black Kyurem on the bench, or even if it's over here or here, anywhere really, anywhere within range of this figure or this figure, you can attack and fly and land here. And now you're in that situation where this is a 2-life figure that's threatening the goal, so they have to move it or surround it or block this side. And like I keep saying, this puts immense pressure on the opponent, so this is something they have to deal with now, which gives you a turn to either take the entry point or move something else up. It's always good to have a 2-life figure right here. Also in the situation where you have this entry point taken, because then they don't have the option to block on this side. Putting a 2-life figure here means that if they attack this and KO it, then you can still surround because this is still here. Let's see. Now, I think Black Kyurem, I think this figure you probably save the DNA Splicer for a good time because of that. Now, obviously, you can save the DNA Splicer with White Kyurem as well. But I kind of like the idea of having White Kyurem on the board as soon as possible, because then you have, you know, the potential Draco Meteor, and you have access to that 3MP figure immediately. Black Kyurem, I think you can do that as well, put it on the board immediately, or you can save it, like I said, for that surprise. And I think that's probably how I would play Black Kyurem, is save the DNA Splicer for either time to, you know, use the 3MP and get us around, or take an entry, some important board objective, or to just cheese your opponent with a huge play. Like even this can actually, figures like Zygarde, Kyogre, and specifically Tapu Fini, I think really help Black Kyurem, because if my opponent develops a specific way, if they put a figure here or on this side here, and you have Kyurem on the side here, you know, normally they block, so you can't get here, but if you're running Tapu Fini and you get a situation where you Pony Wish on your opponent's turn, you can exclude this figure, Black Kyurem, and go for a fly win. And if you're running Celebi, you can actually retry this and get a second try at it. So, you know, not bad actually. And actually, you don't have to save the Black Kyurem for that either. If you turn into Black Kyurem early and just leave it here, your opponent's probably less likely to attack it now, because you have Fly. So if you fly, you land here and win. And so then if it's already Black Kyurem, then you can go for a double chance and go for that win. But the whole reason I was saying maybe wait to transform into Black Kyurem is that you Fly is you don't always want Fly. Like, your opponent can trap you into a surround. So sometimes it's a liability, which is why it's sometimes safer to leave Kyurem as is. Is there anything else I want to talk about with this? Not really. No, I guess not. So I'll do the usual sort of wrap up thing where I try to gather my thoughts and put everything together. So white Kyurem, I'll talk about each one. Well, first I'll say both white Kyurem and black Kyurem share a few things. One, they are a pretty high damage 3MP figure. 3MP Shuppet figure, I should say, is the first thing. Two, it has a really unique point in that it can MP move through an entry point, a blocked entry point, from the bench, which, like I said, I don't think anything else does that. Obviously you have like Steelix that can, toss itself over, but nothing that moves through without an extra plate helping it. Three, the Ice Z move is always good. It's very good on everything, but you have a particularly high damage Z move, so it won't lose to any white attack. It will actually tie with Regigigas, but no one plays Regigigas. That's not important anyway. you have Sub-Zero Slammer to KO a figure and freeze something else within 2 steps of yourself, which is very good. That's also very good for base Kyurem itself, and like I said, that sets up plays if you're running multiple Kyurem. And I Z move this figure, then I freeze this figure. If the Kyurem is here, then this figure is now stuck. So that's very good, and the freeze opens up white Kyurem's attack options as well. So if this is a figure that if your opponent is able to unfreeze it at some point, you can attack, maybe get Draco Meteor and snipe something, or just KO it. Decent option. Always a good option for freeze. And probably the most important thing is it has a second life. It can change forms and even use another DNA splicer immediately. So, I mean, as long as you have DNA splicer, if your opponent KOs it, you just come back, they KO it, you come back. Just until you run out of DNA splicer, you can always do this. So that's good, and like I said, you can immediately use the Reshiram or Zekrom again, and it's a figure you can use on its own. So not terrible. White Kyurem benefits from Ho-Oh because you get Reshiram back. The crazy play I mentioned with Ho-Oh getting KO'd or even Draco Meteored on your opponent's turn, you get Reshiram back and bring out a second white Kyurem. Really cool play in my opinion. And then black Kyurem, like I mentioned, is essentially a 5 to 6 MP figure. Sometimes. On a roll, of course, but your opponent has to always be aware of that. I mean, it's not technically 5 or 6 MP, it's 3 MP plus an additional 2 or 3 steps off of fly. So very good figures in my opinion. like I said, I think what held them back the most is just that they're so Aegis weak that it really hurts them. But like I said, I don't think they need to be used as attackers. And for the most part, I would probably ignore the fusion attacks. In fact, that's probably what I would reduce. Like I said, I would probably max out the 140 move and add chain levels to it. That way you survive Aegis Slash more often. But if you wanted to, you do have the option for the fusion plays. You can run it with Victini, or if you're really feeling yourself, you can run both Black Kyurem and White Kyurem. And like I said, that did work. I saw people use that, and that means that you get the benefits that I listed for both of them. So overall, really nice figures in my opinion, really cool. Some of my favorites in the game. I especially love White Kyurem. I love its design as well. And hopefully I can make a decent deck with them in the future. We'll see. So I did actually take a long time going for that. The only other thing I thought I might talk about today was Rhyperior. I don't think I'll do a full talk about Rhyperior right now then, just because this already went pretty long. And I'm sure I can talk a decent amount about Rhyperior. So all I'll say is that like I forgot about Takeaway. So I brought up Takeaway a couple videos ago. That's another movement effect. And one more movement effect that's very powerful is Bulldozer. So this is something else that Celebi, Abomasnow that I talked about are immune to with Grass Sphere, and Mawile is also immune to as well. So just keep that in mind. I always have to come back to Mawile because it's such a great figure. And Bulldozer was something I forgot about. I'm surprised I did. You know, I actually, maybe I can't say this. I did fight a lot of Rhyperior, but I feel like I fought less than other people did. Thankfully, because it's a very strong figure and sometimes hard to deal with. I guess that's all I'll bring up about it for now, is that Bulldozer is a movement effect and something else to look out for to be immune to. Alright then, yeah, I think that's enough. If I think of something else that I forgot to say or I think I should say about the Kyurem forms, I'll leave it in the comments or bring it up in the next video. But that's it.